Prime Minister Trudeau says he wants Mexico to stay in the North American Free Trade Agreement, or CUSMA as it's known. But if the country doesn't address concerns around Chinese investment, they might have to look at other options.
We will secure Canadian jobs and Canadian growth long into the future. Ideally, we do that as a united North American market. But pending decisions and choices that Mexico has made, we may have to look at other options.
That free trade deal between Canada, the U.S. and Mexico is up for review in 2026. Earlier, I spoke to former Mexican ambassador to China, Jorge Guajardo. He's also a partner at the advisory firm DJA Group, and he says he thinks that Mexico will stay in the deal. Ambassador Guajardo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We are talking a lot about Mexico these days up in Canada because of the new president. And there are questions also about the North American Free Trade Agreement and how that moves forward with Donald Trump. And Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister here, said that Canada would like to keep Mexico in the deal, but that we, quote, may have to look at other options. And that, of course, is because of the Chinese investment in Mexico. Let me start with that. Do you think that it's possible that Mexico could be removed from the USMCA, or CUSMA as we call it?
Well, I don't know. We're back to the future. I think we had this conversation, 6 years ago,
yep,
when USMCA was being renegotiated, same issues. We ended up having a 3-country agreement. Something tells me it's going to be, again, a 3-country agreement. But I don't know. I guess it's once again an opportunity for all 3 countries to bring to the fore their priorities, and we'll have a discussion. And my guess is it's going to end up being a 3-country agreement, but we'll see.
Well, so let's talk about some of the issues that you know an awful lot about, and that seems to be the central problem for the United States and a problem for Canada, and that's, of course, the presence of China in Mexico. So first of all, do you think that it is possible that Mexico will put tariffs on Chinese imports, and do you think that they should do that in order to match what the United States and Canada are doing?
Well, Mexico is already has tariffs in place on Chinese imports, quite aggressive tariffs on Chinese imports. In fact, in some sectors, more aggressive than what Canada has. So, for instance, I read news reports that the Premier of Ontario was having issues with the fact that Canada has tariffs on autos, on Chinese EVs, similar to the ones in the United States, and that Mexico does not. And that is true. That is a fact. And my guess is Mexico will raise tariffs or impose tariffs on Chinese cars. Yep. But I'll give you another example, which is Chinese petrochemicals, plastics, PET, PTA. The United States has 100% tariff on Chinese imports. Mexico has 37% tariffs. Canada has 0% tariffs. So I think they're just bringing to the fore industries that they want to bring attention to and sort of hide others that they don't want to bring attention to. So I think all 3 countries have to get together and sort of negotiate how we're going to treat Chinese imports into our countries, which was not an issue before.
No. And I appreciate that clarification, because, as you know, there are people, politicians in this country, who are characterizing Mexico as a backdoor for cheap Chinese goods, that it has become sort of an outpost for China, Mexico. Would you say that is a fair characterization, or no, based on what you've just said?
No, it's not a fair characterization. First of all, Mexico imposes tariffs on most Chinese imports that are of concern, number one. Number 2, the auto parts sector, which is the one that has been highlighted. There's been a lot of announcements of Chinese companies wanting to invest in Mexico. Most of them were invited by Tesla. Tesla suspended its plans to build its plant in Mexico. And to my understanding, all those announcements, none of them have come to completion or have been acted upon. So as we stand, China is not in the top 10 countries with foreign direct investment in Mexico. And I think it's important that we understand that China invests in Canada considerably more than they invest in Mexico. So no, Mexico is not an outpost for China to enter the USMCA zone.
Yeah, but you would agree that perhaps to placate Canada and the United States, Mexico might need to do more tariffs on electric vehicles in the automotive industry. Is that fair?
I think Mexico will have to do it to placate its domestic manufacturers.
Sure.
Not even concerned. I mean, Mexico has a very strong auto parts sector that stands to be displaced by Chinese-owned auto parts sector if they were to come to Mexico. So my guess is Mexico will raise tariffs not as because of a concern of the free trade zone, but for concern of its own manufacturers.
Right. Tell me what your concerns are around President-elect Trump's threats of tariffs. As you know, he's threatened tariffs kind of across the board. For our country, he's talking about 10 to 20%. For yours, he seems to be talking about 25%. And part of that, obviously, is to do with the issue of the border and migration. What kind of impact would those tariffs have on Mexico's economy if they were put in place?
Well, I guess tariffs would be detrimental to the free trade zone, obviously, to Mexico's economy, as to Canada's economy.
Sure.
Both Mexico and Canada have the U.S. as our #1 trading destination. Yeah. So we would be affected greatly. Now, the issues of concern for President Trump are issues that I believe Mexico either is already acting on or should be acting on. On the issue of immigration, I believe Mexico is already cooperating in trying to staunch the flow of immigrants into the U.S. Mexico border. And on the issue of fentanyl, which is something that President-elect Trump has brought as a concern, I think it's a legitimate concern. I think Mexico should be doing more in stopping or in combating organized crime in Mexico, but also in cooperating with the U.S. and Canada in stopping the Chinese flow of fentanyl or precursors into Mexico or the United States. I think they're legitimate concerns. I think they will be addressed. I think in the past we've shown that we can cooperate well for the benefit of all three countries. And if that is the sole concern of President Trump, I think those are concerns that can be addressed.
Okay. Ambassador Guajardo, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.